Hey, what's going on? My name's Alex. I go by Earl's World, and today we're going to talk about sidechaining. We're going to cover a lot in this video. We're going to talk about what sidechain is, different types of sidechains we can do, pairs of things that work well together when sidechain. We're also going to cover some techniques and maybe some challenges and solutions along the way too. So first up, what is sidechain? In its simplest form, sidechain is taking an input signal and using that to control the behavior of a target or a main signal. And we can use that to control such things as volume, frequency, compression, among other things as well. It's a very useful tool we can use to create more space in our mix. And with that being said, I just want to make an important caveat before we get started too, that don't over obsess with sidechain compression. I think it gets a little bit too much hype in all the social media and things we see today. It's a very useful tool, don't get me wrong, but in terms of what we should focus on here, if you don't have good gain staging, good sound selection, good arrangement, good composition, good EQing, good regular compression, then no amount of sidechain is ever going to help your mix out. So just keep that in mind, that these are tools to help clean up your mix a bit, but it's not going to save your mix entirely if the foundations are bad. But with that being said, let's dive in. I'm excited to cover some of these topics with you. There are 4 main categories I want to cover: volume-based sidechaining, compression-based sidechaining, frequency-based sidechaining, and the last category is a little different. It's using arrangement and composition-based decisions to actually avoid sidechaining. So in a sense, it's kind of like the anti-sidechain, but I think it's super important to discuss as well. So let's dive in. All right, to start off, I have a little example for us. So let's take a bass and take a kick drum with no sidechaining and see what is happening. All right, if you see on the frequency analyzer right here that there's a lot of space in the low end where they are overlapping with each other. And so that's going to create a really muddy mix. And on top of that, it's also going to eat up a ton of our headroom that, like, later on when we want to mix and master our project, when we're trying to make it as loud as possible, it's going to eat at what we can do. Like, I'll even show you right here. I put a basic limiter on the master, and just without doing any basic things and letting it play, you're going to see that it's already like hitting the limit. Just like these are at full volume right now. The frequencies of the kick and the bass are like stacking on top of each other at those moments, and it's causing a momentary spike, which is causing the limiter to trigger. And so we can use sidechain as a tool to reduce this, create a little bit more space in the mix so that you can properly hear the kick and hear the bass, but they feel separate from each other. So in this first example, I drew in the volume automation. So what I'm doing, I took a utility and I'm automating the gain up and down to create space for the kick drum. So let's just play this really quick. And as you can see, if you look down, we actually aren't triggering the limiter now because we're giving enough space for the kick and the sub and the bass to work together. And so that's the first way. The pros of using manual automation is you can get really, really specific and nuanced to exactly like what you want. If you wanted to change up the rhythm a bit, you could, You could not that sounds good here, but you could make these changes and make very micro adjustments and have full control and autonomy over your mix. The cons of it is that it can get very time consuming and very tedious going in every single kick or every single thing you want to automate. And so I think there are other solutions that can potentially work a little bit better than this. There are instances where you might want to do this to create a pattern. It's a great tool, but there's other ways to approach it as well. So now we're going into the next subcategory, which is automated volume-based sidechaining. And so for this, I'm using a tool called ShaperBox. I have it on an LFO, which is set to quarter notes, which is in tune with the rhythm of the bass or of the kick drum. So now we can play this. So this can simplify the process. Instead of having to draw every single line in, we can use a tool that will help us. Okay, so volume automation is great when we have a steady 4 on the floor rhythm, but can we use it when we say we have something more of a breakbeat? And the answer is absolutely. Depending on your tool, I'm using Shaperbox in this example, you can take in MIDI or audio sources as well, and so I will give examples of both here. So in Shaperbox, we can go in, we can set the source to audio, and make sure that it's triggering from an external sidechain input. And so it will listen for an audio source, and from that it will trigger just whenever the audio source goes, as opposed to just a time-based one. And if you'd prefer, you can also do that just strictly on MIDI as well. So let's open up another version of this. So in this instance, we're taking this kick MIDI and we're using that to trigger the sidechain in Shaperbox by sending it to it. It's very similar in LFO tool and other volume automation tools as is in Shaperbox right here. So now if we play it, we'll also see that it's triggering as well. Okay, so that covers the basics of volume-based automation. As you see, we can do it manually, we can do it automated, and the automated way we can trigger from a rate-based trigger, an audio-based trigger, and a MIDI-based trigger. So now, when is this useful? Like, when is volume automation useful? And for me, I think the main thing here, it depends on the kick source. Is it static or is it dynamic? And in this example, it's static. So we have a kick. It's not changing in volume at all. It's staying very stationary. This is common in techno and house music and things like that. And so for this reason, it might be useful to use a volume kick because the signal is not changing. And so we can get a very clean volume curve for every single hit, and it can be the exact same. And that's something that we look for there. But what are some instances where we might not want to do this? This brings up the next category, which is compression-based sidechaining. So in the previous examples, we had a kick that didn't have a lot of movement to it. It stayed at the same level the entire time. But what if we have an example now where we have a kick that is playing at a different rhythm, like one that has more variation to it, maybe like someone playing the drums? So let's listen to this really quickly. Okay, and so now let's do that with the automation, like how we were previously doing it, and kind of see what's going on. As you can hear, it's triggering on all the hits, but I think the problem with this is that it's triggering the same exact amount for every single hit. So no matter if it's a strong kick or a soft kick, it is triggering identically, which it can lead to more of like a weird pulse. And I think when you're going for something that's a little bit more acoustic and natural sounding, it can sound very unnatural doing it. So instead of that, we can now approach and use a compressor. And in this example, it will, when we hit the threshold, it'll only compress what is above the threshold. And so there'll be instances of some of the kicks which are lower level, lower intensity, and it's not going to trigger the compression as much, so it's going to have a lot more natural feel to it. Look at the lines there, and as you see, the lighter hits aren't triggering as much compression. So when you have a source that has a little bit more dynamic nature to it, you might want to look to a compressor more than a volume automation tool. And then naturally, the next progression there is that you may want to only target certain frequencies. And so the next step in this would be multi-band compression, where we're only picking certain frequencies, where maybe in this example, we only want a little bit of the low end to get out of the way when the kick is hitting, but we want to keep the rest of it so we don't get as much of that pulsing feeling. Then we can use something like a multi-band tool. I'm using FabFilter Pro MB in this case. So that adds even more granularity. And what I want to express here, as we keep going down this line, we're going to keep going more and more granular in what we can do. The volume automation, a lot of that is full band automation right there, or full band compression. But we can begin to start doing multi-band volume automation, multi-band compression, and start targeting specific frequencies that we want to shave off and save as well. All right, so next up we have frequency-based sidechaining, which our main two categories are dynamic EQ and spectral sidechaining. Let's take this key and this vocal sample and hear them together. What we can do is we can take the vocal and apply it on the keys and save some space and create a little bit more space for the vocal in a very specific region that we target. This could be helpful because we could, if we wanted to, we can just put up a ton of bands and make them react dynamically, like even more bands than some of the multi-band compressors. So we can get very fine-tooth and very surgical with our sidechaining here.
I fall. Yeah, I'm falling for you. And I don't know if you feel the way I'm feeling for you.
Another tool we can look at that does this fairly well is Track Spacer. It will take in the source that has 32 bands to it and will adjust it accordingly to what's going on. We can set a high cut and a low cut and the amount going on. Be careful if you use a tool like Track Spacer because it can suck the absolute life out of something, so you use it on very low settings, but it can definitely be helpful sometimes.
Still I fall. Yeah, I'm falling for you. And I don't know if you feel the way I'm feeling for you.
It's very subtle, but the vocal will just has that much more of a pocket, which it can make it sit in the mix a little bit nicer, kind of doing this option. So these are really useful when you want to go surgical and when you want to really carve a little bit of space out. So next up is spectral sidechaining, which is even more granular than dynamic EQ. So in an EQ, you can break things down into a bunch of bands. So the multi-band compressor was 3 bands. The dynamic EQ off Pro Q4, we can break it into even more bands than that. So spectral plugins will break things down into discrete bins, but there can be thousands of them. And so what that allows is for some really fine-tuned control over what you're trying to accomplish. Spectral plugins give you a lot more control and what can allow you to only touch the frequencies that are truly there, as opposed to making broader scoops, so it's like a spoon to a shovel. Let's just take a look at Pro Q4 really quickly. So in spectral EQ mode, we can go and you can get to it. You right click a band and you click spectral EQ. You can select it, and when it plays, it'll only remove the frequencies it detects from the vocal, as opposed to everything we've selected. So it will sit even more in its pocket and not remove things that don't need to be removed.
Still I fall. Yeah, I'm falling for you. And I don't know if you feel the way I'm feeling for you.
So Pro Q4 is a great tool. Another great tool to look at is Soothe. It will also do it. And so it very, very similarly, you can just set the region that you want to control, and it will help reduce the amount of frequencies in that region, giving more space for the vocal in this example.
Still I fall. Yeah, I'm falling for you. And I don't know if you feel the way I'm feeling for you.
This can be a great tool to really make some space in your mix. Be careful not to overdo it, because you can really suck the life out if you try to use too much soothe or too much dynamic EQ, but it's a great way to just open it up and have something sit a little bit better. Hey, how's it going? Alex here. This video is getting a little long, so I decided to split it into 2. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the next part.